Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Hudda Tonight. This is our second segment of the program. We're going to be talking about a political dispute over some territory that once belonged to the Emirates. It is now under the control of Iran. There are three islands in particular that we're going to be talking about tonight. We're joined by Professor Emaad.muhanna, political science professor and also professor of strategic studies. Assalamu alaikum, Professor.
Walaikum salam. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being with us, for continuing to be with us as well. This subject comes at a time when there's an escalation, you know, in a great concern.
After the revolution died in 1980 and buried here in Egypt, was also in control of the islands, never really accepted any negotiation or compromising around these islands, and the situation remains as such until this moment. The Arab Peninsula, the Arab League really failed to provide any solution, not even the United Nations. So as we said, the difficulty here is before 1945 there was no claims as such for borders.
And oil wasn't discovered in Saudi Arabia till 1940. Was it?
It was in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
And it was just in the beginning, because the oil really kind of flourished in the 70s. Or the end of 60s. That's when it was used in the Arabian-Israeli War in 1973. But before that, it was just you know, certain discoveries here and there. But yeah, it wasn't a major source.
So do you think that this has a role to play in Iran's militarization?
Yeah.
Is that and what is the basis for their claims?
Well, the basis for their claims that they had people here and there, but again, you can't really, because if you look at the situation, you're close to about 150 years in that claim, and none of them can actually take over. But it's a hegemony kind of thing, because Iran has taken over the islands by force, and Emirates doesn't have a strong army to basically confront Iran. So the situation remains a status quo. You know, so this is really the situation. But the claims have been very difficult to actually force Iran. And we must also remember that the International Court of Justice, or even arbitration, political or economic arbitrations, always take into account the military force. So if you have, you know, for example, the United States against a small country, again, the United States will win.
You know, it's interesting you would use that example, because as you talk about this island really belonging to the Emirates, what comes to mind is the 1960s with Cuba, the island of Cuba.
That's right.
And the Soviets were at the time
the Cuban missiles.
Yeah, the Cuban Missile Crisis.
So it's always, and this is what we always say, that economic claims are always influenced by political power, and political power is supported by military power. So you've got, number one, to have a military power, then you're going to have a political power, thirdly, you're going to have an economic power.
All right, so the basis, again, you're saying is that it's just that they have the military power to back their political interests.
That's right. It's part of the Shia expansion in the region. It's driven by an ideology, and the land is just one of the tools to get in control. So if you look at the situation we're talking about here, is no different to the situation of their involvement in Iraq, or their involvement in Bahrain, or their involvement in Hezbollah. So it's just an expansion, and the hegemonic powers are basically have one focus, is control. And it depends on what you have in mind and what you have at hand to control with. So if it's United States, if they want to get to the Middle East to control resources, then create a rumor of weapons of mass destruction.
So with this kind of, can we say, calculus in the equation, you know, it's not enough to say that historically you didn't have any interest, and it's maybe closer to ours, and that's not enough.
No, that's not enough. And also, as we said, it's just you can't even prove either side, because before that time it depended really on travelers. You might have American travelers or Egyptian travelers or Emirati travelers or Iranian. But the history closer to Emirates in terms of control, they are closer. The distance is almost the same, but they are closer to Emirates in terms of control. But at the time, you're talking about a nation that, the islands were used for fishing and stuff like that. So who was using it more? This is really something that you can claim. But in the end, there was no solid evidence to say that, yes, it belongs to Emirates, because when we talk about arbitration or the International Court of Justice, it all comes back to papers. If we give the respective viewers an example, there is still a village close to Tel Aviv, and it's part of the Egyptian map. The village is called Rishrash. That village on the Egyptian map is part of the Egyptian territory. But it's occupied by Israel. So if you want to get that sorted, you're just going to have to go back in history. If we look at Taba, for example, as an example, it was finalized in 1988, and the war was finished in 1973. So you're talking about 15, 16 years to sort this out. So territorial claims and disputes are very, very difficult to dispute, especially that before 1945 there were no claims. After the collapse of the Ottoman Empire in 1923, that's when the Western world started to draw lines and basically draw the borders of countries. This is where you start seeing where Saudi Arabia is and where Oman is and etc. But before that, we really never had any maps as such.
Now, we've talked a little, you addressed the issue of Iran's claims to these three islands. What about the Emirates? Is it basically that they have a longer history in using the islands for fishing, as you said, and other things? Is that the basis for their claims?
Yes, it is. And some of the papers, because if you remember, we said in the beginning there was an agreement in the 19th century between the Sharjah and the British Empire. Because here again, it reminds us of the Palestine, the protection over Palestine. Wherever you find territorial dispute in the Middle East, England is always part of it. Always. So if you look at the Israeli claims in Palestine, it happened in 1947 when the British were in control of Palestine under protection rule. Egypt was also under the protection rule of England, because they took, when they divided the Middle East in 1923, England took Palestine and Egypt and Lebanon. So always, wherever you find territorial dispute, England is part of it. So England had an agreement with the Sharjah ruler at the time, or end of the 1880s, to basically give Emirates certain rights to the islands. And these are some of the claims, or some of the documents that they are using in their claims, that they had an agreement with the British a long time ago, exactly.
Going back to the 1920s?
1920s. But Iran never had that. But Iran was influencing, or spreading its influence, political influence and control over the northern part of the Arabian Gulf. So talking about the part of Iraq and the trade in there. And this is part of the Iranian ideology to spread the Shia approach in the region. So what we see at this point is just part of a long-term plan worked out by Iran. So land was just another tool to get into it.
I'm just curious in terms of the dispute. Have there actually been any military confrontations?
No military confrontation, because, as we said, Emirates is not going to get into such
it will be a losing situation.
Exactly, and it's just going to escalate. Not just because of the islands, because of the religious differences. You're talking about Sunni Shia, so it's just going to escalate further. I think Iran is playing it basically hard to get. They know they are one of the strongest armies in the region. They very much aware that the Arabs will never unite against them, because the first step for Emirates to resolve the issue is to resolve it under the umbrella of the Arab League. where a lot of neighbors have problems with Iran. So I think the Arab League could have played a role in basically supporting the claim of Iran, at least with just some endorsement or statements.
But is it realistic to expect Iran to ever agree to Arab League negotiating?
No, but at least you can have basic, and we talked about that, if the Arabs way back managed to reform the Arab League and have basically a joint army, that would have scared Iran. So in the end, as we go back to 2 minutes ago, is military power, political power, economic power. This is basically how it works. United States, with the military power, can make history, can change history. They said Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. They never said that because of their power in politics or power in economy. It's because of their military power. We said so. So it is reality. So this is basically how it works. And the situation here is, it's a political confrontation is backed up by military support. So in a military in a political confrontation, do whatever you like, but in the end, if you don't have a strong army to back you up, can't do it.
Professor, the gloves are always off whenever you're with us.
No, it's the reality. I think part of the damage we suffer from in this nation, the Arab and the Muslims overall, is we don't have reality. We always, swim in dreams. Like, for example, when certain Arabs say, well, now we don't need United States, so we've got partnership with Russia. Russia's not going to make partnership with anyone. It's mutual benefit. When the airplane was bombed in the terrorist attack, the situation changed. So he's no longer a friend. So we need to work out our stance based on benefits and interests. Nobody's your friend, and it'll never be. So the fact here is, Iran needs to see a strong voice, militarily, politically, and economically, to be able to withdraw, or at least sit to negotiate.
Okay, so this answers my next question.
Yep.
That in recent years, the negotiations to resolve the land dispute probably haven't gotten much traction.
No. And if you look at even, and I'll give an example of there's an Indian island, I can't remember the name now, but it was used by the Portuguese long ago as a passage. India couldn't deny the Portuguese passing through the Indian land to go through to that island, because there is something in law called the customary law, in international law. So if I go through your house to my house behind you, and you left me like that 20, 30 years, you can't stop me. You can't say, well, it's my private property. No, because you've been in the last 30 years accepting that.
Right.
So you continue. So here, it goes back to the fact here that Iran is there now for 40 years. In the same scale, look at everything the Arab lost. Monuments, land. It goes under the customary law. You know, you've left Israel since 1947. The case never resolved. You won't be able to resolve it now. Because the longer, and this is the idea, I don't want to say clever, but it's the shrewdness of it's a tactic of Israel is playing on time.
Delay, yeah.
And the longer you delay it, the difficult becomes to resolve.
People are dying, leadership is changing, a new generation doesn't understand.
Exactly. So it becomes the tension of that particular case is going to get less and less. So if we go back to the example of Taba, for example, if Egypt lifted a claim over Taba, and it's 1 square kilometer, to the 80s, for example, 10 years after the 1973 war, it would have been gone. But the claim was made immediately after the war.
Which one? You said 1 kilometer square?
It's Taba.
Taba.
It's on the border of the Aqaba Gulf. On the Aqaba Gulf, which is the two branches of the Red Sea.
It's really small.
It is very small.
Is this the smallest of them, or?
No. Taba is an Egyptian place, but I'm giving you an example of the claim.
I'm confused. The name is Lesser and Greater Tanb.
Tanab, yeah.
Okay.
There are 3 islands. Those are the ones in the Gulf. So I think the Emirates claim has been delayed.
Too long.
They never really took action since 1970, or even going back to 1920, because they had the advantage of dealing with the British in the beginning, and end of the 19th century, and in 1920 particularly, when an agreement was drawn. So they left it as such, and now it's becoming very difficult, because you're looking at a situation where it's 40 years down the line, Iran is not going to let go. And Iran at this point is using the islands as a military base. So here it takes us to the next point, which is the national security of Iran. Why are they holding into it? Because the islands are overlooking, they are basically in the middle of the
Very
Arabian Gulf.
strategic position.
Exactly. Abu Musa, for example, it's right in the center where if you go, past with the ships, if you go in east from the right and you go in west from the left. So basically it's right in the center. So if they use it for rockets, for example, or missiles, they can be blocking the Middle East, the Middle East from the
shipping
Arabian
lane?
Gulf. Exactly, the shipping line. So here it gives us an idea why Iran holding into that. And we can also say that part of the nuclear program they're doing, they securing themselves. Iran has a very, and we always, I like to always not praise, but at least admit the intelligence of your enemy, so you can deal with it. Iran is securing itself in a circle. If you look at Iran, for example, their hands are in Iraq, their hands are in Syria, their hands are in Lebanon. Can you see how the circle is going? Okay, and you go Bahrain, Oman, Saudi Arabia, they're having just certain communities, Yemen. So they're holding 2 main areas, Hormuz passage and Bab el-Mandeb passage.
Bab el-Mandeb, that was another one.
Yeah. That's where they're supporting the Houthis in Yemen. Because the Houthis are the ones that are fighting the legitimate government in Yemen. So Iran, all we want to say that Iran is holding into the 3 islands because the 3 islands can or are currently used as a military base, overlooking the land of the Arabs, overlooking the land of Iran. So if they place missiles or rockets on these islands, they can defend outside the Iranian borders their land. So I'm not going to let you come into my land, I'm going to fight you outside.
Right.
And this is what the United States was threatening. If you remember, a few years ago when they were talking about the nuclear program, they said, we're going to move the aircraft carriers. The aircraft carriers will be met by the 3 islands. So the defense on the Iranian land will be from the islands before you enter into Iran.
Yeah.
So it's a front.
And you mentioned the nuclear deal with the P5+1.
Yes.
If it took P5+1 to get the nuclear deal, including U.S. and all these great powers, what chance does Emirates have?
Exactly, exactly. So this is what I just said, a minute ago. We've got to always, because part of the cultural erosion in our nation is that we always look down at our enemies. They're pigs. But the fact is, you've got to respect their views so you can deal with it. But we say, well, God is going to help you. God helps people with reasons. So you can't claim that you're spreading God's religion, but you've got no army. You can't do that. You're not looking after your nation.
Yeah.
You're not looking after education, culture, and you claim that God is going to help you. No. God, basically, and this is what Prophet Muhammad said, that God might support the nation that is disbeliever. It's an unbeliever nation. But if they have justice. And this is what we see in a Western society. Why are we losing to them? Because they have justice we don't have. They look after their work, we don't. They have good societal systems that we don't have. So this is really where we've got to wake up. Whatever rights we need to have, I've got to have the means for it.
Right.
I've got to have a strong army. I've got to have education, political will, and political expertise to deal with it.
Okay, so we've addressed negotiations and or the lack thereof. I'd like to ask you about international perception. The map makers in respective countries.
Yes.
How do they draw these islands? Are they the possession of Emirates or Iran or what?
No, they are in the center of the Gulf. Basically, they currently, the world works on a status quo, again, supported by military control. How is Palestine drawn? To add to your question. It's not drawn as Israel.
Right.
The same thing is drawn as Iran. So this is where the map is not going to make a difference. So the fact here is Israel or Palestine is not drawn as Palestine. It's drawn as Gaza Strip and West Bank.
West Bank, yeah.
But this is part of Palestine. The other part of Palestine is drawn as Israel. So who controls? Winners make history. Powerful people or powerful armies make history.
The lambs are not the writers of history. The lions are the ones that write history.
Yeah.
All right. What about the British? You said so pretty much everybody, with the exception of the. What about Arab maps? Do the Emirati maps?
No, the Arab maps will put it under Emirates. But here again, if we're talking objectively, it stands nowhere.
Right.
And if you allow me, I'll give another example. There is Halayb and Shalatin. It's a part, southern eastern part of Egypt. It's just a triangle. The Egyptian maps put that as part of the Egyptian map, and it's between Egypt and Sudan.
Yes, I know this place. Yeah.
And Sudan puts it on their maps. But if you go back to the British map, it's part of Egypt. So here again. A dispute all over. The world, excuse me, the world is full of territory disputes. In the end, how do you go about it? Negotiations always have to be supported by a military. This is where they take into account that if we don't really give you your right, you're going to take it by force.
You know, as you talk about this, I'm thinking about other examples around the world. Some U.S. territories, for example, the state of Hawaii, which is in the middle of nowhere in the Pacific Ocean. Nobody's ever disputed the U.S. because it has...
Exactly. It's the power.
Right.
They just took over. It's always known as its own country. Hawaii. You know, but now it became the state number 51. Nobody said anything.
Or
Alaska.
Another one. It's not connected to the mainland.
Exactly, because Alaska is part of Russia.
It's a lot closer. It's only about
it's a Russian land, but it was sold. The Russians, they were occupying the Alaska at the time. They sold it to the United States. So again, nobody objected.
Fair and square. Now, I'm curious your reaction. It's a bit off topic. No, but we're talking about the territorial disputes.
National security is always connected. Economic damage is part of national security. If I can't find food, don't expect me to fight. So it's always interconnected.
I'm thinking about this disputed territory in the South China Sea. Taiwan's claiming China's...
At this point, Taiwan is very much part of China. And if we go back to the era of Bush, George II, he also he made a visit to China, and he basically he wanted to play, you know, push your luck at the time, and he had a meeting or a public conference with the Chinese president, and asked him to let Taiwan go. And China said, I remember the statement quite clearly, the release, or it's not the freedom as such, it's just to, as part of, like Hong Kong, the release of Taiwan affects the national security of China.
That's right.
And it destabilizes the region. So this is where we're talking about long-term vision, because if China let Taiwan go, he might expect that every other Macau might go, and then it becomes a chaos. So this is how we look at things. When you know, land is always like a nail in a coffin. You always leave a nail behind, so you can always come back to it. The 3 islands in the Arabian Gulf are basically the Iranian nail to remain in control of the Arabian Gulf. They are right in the center. They overlooking the Gulf. They can easily, with certain light weapons, be the front line of defending the main Iranian land. And again, here is looking at long-term vision. Because the fact here is you had a piece of land, but you never looked at it. I took over the piece of land. I stole it from you, but I had a vision for it. And this is where we need to look at the basics. We've lost a lot of resources. Now, off topic, but we're selling oil cheap. They taking the oil from us, stocking it. So when our oil is finished, they're going to sell it to us.
Right.
Vision is about everything in this nation. And when we lost our vision, in every direction, military, and this is the instructions of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is, make an army, be strong for them. But we don't. If you took in, how many armies do you have in the 23 countries? 3? You had Iraq, Syria, both destroyed. You've got Egypt, Saudi Arabia. That's about it. So if you've got an external, army coming in, you got nothing.
And you're saying that we can't expect Russia to come or to Bella.
Russia is here in the Middle East to stay. Russia looks at the Middle East as we call it, the warm waters. They want to get into there. The future is here. They have they've done their homework. The future of the world is in the Middle East, and not because we I don't want to say good nation. We are good nations with our religion and what God has bestowed on us, but we lost quite a lot. We've gone astray.
Yeah.
If you look at Europe, it's collapsing. It's an aging society. Economically, they're going down. United States is going down morally. The American society is going to collapse from within, morally. South America is growing. China is growing. The next in turn are the Arabs. But what we need is just one thing, a leader. This is what we need. 500 million in numbers. Military. Currently, you are the second in terms of equipments after the United States. If you gather all, aircrafts and tanks, etc. So you've got the tools. What we need is the internal will to be a strong nation and lead economically. If we can manage, and we probably talked about that in other episodes, is that the Arab joint market can get the Arab nation ahead of the European community in less than 4 years because of resources and money and manpower.
The beginning, you
so achieves basically
changing the name of Arab League to Arab Union.
Exactly. We talked about that because it's the only one that doesn't have it. Reform it, constitution, change the culture of people, that I'm not an Egyptian and you Saudi. We are Arabs. Number one, get people on the same page when it comes to culture, reform the Arab League, have a leader with basically one ideology to make this nation a powerful one. You become powerful when you believe you want to be. But when we believed always we are undermined, we are weak. You know, what can we do in the United States? We can't really confront them. This is when we became weak. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ confronted the unbelievers, and they are vast in numbers, against nothing, almost. So believe in success, you will succeed. And what we have at this point is a weak nation, not because of equipment, not because of economy, it's because we are inside ourselves, are weak.
So tonight's discussion on these 3 islands is just a small part of a much larger story.
Exactly.
And the prospects for success of these islands is perhaps a microcosm of the larger
exactly.
Arab world.
It's just it's an example. If you look at the hadith of Prophet when he said that all nations will come upon you as people get around the plate of food, and is that because we are small in numbers? He said no, you are large, but basically
weak.
You mean nothing. You've got no weight. So the fact here is Iran with 80 million, and just leave the respected viewers with that. Iran.
This is the population of Iran.
Exactly. 82 millions. Challenging how many Arabs? 500 million.
It's the second largest ethnic group in the world.
Exactly.
Arabs are.
After China.
After China, yeah.
Challenging you. Can you do anything about it? No, we go for negotiations. I remember President Sadat said, peace is for the powerful. Peace is not for the weak. Because you can't expect your enemies or your opponents to accept peace if you are weak. You've got to be powerful to force them to sit around the table.
Well, I think you've said it all, Professor.
No,
No. I mean, you've answered all the questions.
I'm very interested in cultural revolution in this nation.
Yeah.
We've got to believe in ourselves, believe that we can do it, believe that we are powerful with our own beliefs, ideologies, and our stand, our principles. When we believe that we are powerful, we will lead.
Professor, thank you so much for being with us. Professor emaad.muhanna, telling it like it is for our second segment on the subject of these disputed islands in the Gulf. We will have a short break, inshallah, come back for a much lighter subject. We're looking at Surah Al-Baqarah, inshallah. Please get your Holy Qur'ans and open them up to the second surah in the Qur'an. We're going to be going through, taking lessons from it, inshallah.
TV commercials motivate viewers into immediate action and to sway consumer loyalty from one brand or service to the